Good morning. This is that one guy broadcasting from sunny St. Joseph. Today I'm starting a new series chronicling my new project. Let's go to the tracking station and go here. The Project Duna hub, which I need to reclassify. It is not a drone, it is technically a space station until it starts moving. Now, what we're looking at here is the start of my mission to build an entire surface base on Duna at once. The way that this is going to work is I have designed 4 engines that are going to be mounted here, 4 RCS tanks that will be mounted here. I will mount a sky crane type vehicle here that will be carrying the crane rover with it when it first goes up. And then I'm going to just make a train, and I'm going to try to get it as evenly crisscrossed as possible of base parts. Now, in this first episode, I'm just going to go ahead and start assembling this craft right here. And I'm going to get, at least on camera, one example of the engine docked and one example of the RCS docked. Now, the RCS is much less exciting. This thing does have a little RCS of its own right here and here, and the reason it looks the way it does is number one, there's not enough room for more solar panels here, and I figured I only really need 2 if I'm in a north-south orbit around the sun. And at all times, it will have a satellite that is roughly, or satellite, herp, communication disk and some antenna roughly pointed at Kerbin. So, without further ado, let's begin Project Duna. Okay. So, let's go to the Space Center and go to the launch pad. Now, the first thing I'm going to put up is the Project Duna engine. Now, this thing should look pretty darn familiar. It's a rough, I guess, adaptation, that's a new word. Adaptation of my fuel dump for my space stations. Now, one thing about Project Duna is it is orbiting at a much, much lower orbit than my space stations do. My space stations are generally 150 by 150. Project Duna is currently a 135 by about 135. So I don't really think that'll affect construction at all. It's just orbiting lower than what it would be orbiting. So one thing I don't like about these Rocco Max mainsail engines is they tend to cause really, really uncorrectable roll. So I do not need to be heading west. I will throttle down a little bit and bring myself to inverse east 60 degrees. Now, you may notice that this whole thing is being launched upside down, and that is simply to let this fuel tank drain out into this fuel tank so that I'm not trying to maneuver a full fuel tank once I get on orbit. Now, let me just see where we're sitting here. Alright, and how are we doing on our fuel status here? Pretty darn good. Now what's going to happen is I've set this whole thing up with action keys to let this part of the engine go and reveal a docking port right here, and to jettison these shrouds. Now, there we are. We still need to be heading. There we go. How how are we doing? Okay, time to slow down and do a gravity turn, or a more aggressive roll in order to increase our horizontal velocity. Now, if you're an avid KSP player, that makes perfect sense. But I, again, make videos for the everyman, and not every man knows how to do such things like that, and when you should do things like that. Now, mind you, I experiment with mine a little bit, but everything seems to be going according to plan. Now, I swear with the RCS, I'll just shut up and put some music on, but I really would like to talk about this project for this first launch. Not necessarily the whole first docking, but the first launch at the very least. This project is an idea of mine that I had a few weeks ago, that if I'm going to build a colony on Duna, I basically need to take every single piece of hardware that I would need to build this base, for the reason that it would take several years to complete the Duna project otherwise. And the base itself is not going to be called Project Duna. I'm still trying to come up with a really cool name for that. In fact, I'm still designing the base itself. I'm just putting up the hardware to take it to Duna now. So let me see, how are we doing? We're doing quite okay. Now, when we get on a pretty good suborbital trajectory, I'm going to cut the engines, or not even necessarily suborbital, but just low enough that when I jettison things, they will burn up. Cool. Now, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to hit 2. Darn it, I'm going to hit 1. Excellent. That worked out actually quite wonderfully. Now, we maneuver this away from this old piece of crap, and we need to turn us around pretty darn quickly. Now, I love this cool little sensation that we're falling away from this, but we actually just knocked it away from us. Okay, now let's go. Now that I have the engines on, I don't necessarily need the RCS. Oh my, oh crap, that's why you, darn it, oops, I can correct for this. Well, would I even be getting a close approach? No. Oops. The beautiful part is I'm not really needing all of this fuel right now. I mean, I'm sorry, that was electrical charge. Come on now. It only took about 3/4 of the tank to complete the orbital burn, and I was a little bit overzealous on that, so let's go ahead and swing this back down to something reasonable. Yeah, sure, 108 will work, and then I just need to get back into orbit. I screwed things up. Okay, there we go. I just had to check on my video software, which went ahead and toggled my RCS, or my SAS status. How are we doing on fuel, by the way? Still pretty darn good. Alrighty then. So I'm going to go ahead and can it and move forward with the docking. Alright, and there we go. Now I am going to need to give this thing just a tiny course correction here. And that's why I refueled the RCS. There we go. Tiny course correction complete. And we have an empty fuel tank with a nuclear engine on it. And with 4 of these things, I'm hoping I'm going to get the pulling power that I need, not necessarily the speed, but the torque, if you will, to get out to Duna with everything in tow. So I'm going to go back to the Space Center. And prepare to launch the Project Duna RCS. Now, the reason I'm launching an RCS module with this ship, even though it has a tiny bit of RCS all by itself, is for the simple reason that I'm going to need RCS storage, not just for course corrections in flight that require more than 400 units of RCS. Oh, excellent. I timed that pretty darn good. So I'm going to guess probably right about there is where it needs to be for a quick intercept on launch. And this rocket flies more like a standard rocket instead of some sort of upside down monstrosity. So I'm going to shut up, the music's coming back on, and here we go. Okay, and there we go. This is the basic engine setup of my Project Duna, I guess train engine is the best way I can describe it. The rest of the mission specs are going to go a little something like this. This particular 2-set mission is going to be repeated twice. I'm sorry, this particular two-set mission is going to be repeated about 3 times. One for this engine set, one for this engine set, one for this engine set. Then I'm going to bring up a series of ships to fill up these tanks. Now that's going to take a little while because the best I've been able to do is get about half of one of these guys into orbit, a little less than actually. Then I'm going to start chaining all of my modules together over here on this side between the engines so that I have a fairly even weight distribution. Then I'm going to put my sky crane and my ground crane right here. It's going to use the reserve RCS tanks and whatever fuel is left over here. So hopefully, and I haven't tested this yet, hopefully I'm going to be able to get out to Duna and have enough, I guess for lack of a better word, leftover fuel to do what I need to do. I may or may not bring more with me, I'm not sure. Alright, this has been That One Guy. Thanks for watching.